Somewhere right now, someone at a dinner table is telling a 25-year-old that their generation is soft, that they spend too much on coffee, that people used to just work harder. And here's the part that should genuinely stop you. The exact same accusation was written down in almost the exact same words over 2,000 years ago. This isn't a modern argument, it's a 2,500-year-old script. And every single generation, including the one doing the blaming right now, eventually gets handed the same role. Let's find out why this keeps happening and who actually benefits from it. If you think kids these days is a recent invention, you're off by roughly 2.5 millennia. Ancient Greek writers complained that the youth of their time were disrespectful, impatient, and addicted to luxury. Roman elders said the same thing about Roman youth. Medieval clergy wrote sermons about the laziness of the younger generation. Every single era in recorded history has left behind some older voice complaining that the incoming generation is going to ruin everything. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. And patterns that repeat for 2,500 years across completely different economies, governments, and cultures usually aren't about the young people at all. They're about something structural. Something that happens every single time societies go through economic stress. So what actually triggers it? Here's the pattern, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. The generational blame game doesn't stay constant, it spikes, and it spikes at very specific moments, right when the economy gets harder for people trying to enter it. Think about what's actually happening beneath the surface. Older generations have already built their lives. They bought their homes, they secured their pensions, they locked in their position years or decades ago, often under completely different economic conditions. Younger generations are trying to do the exact same things: buy a home, build savings, start a career, except the rules have changed since the older generation played the game. And here's the psychological trap. When someone has already succeeded under one set of conditions and they watch someone else struggle under a different set of conditions, the instinctive reaction isn't usually the conditions must have changed. It's why can't they just do what I did? That single question is where almost every generational insult in history originates. But here's what makes it worse. It's not just an innocent misunderstanding. Every few years, a headline blames a generation for killing some industry through laziness or bad habits. Millennials killed the diamond industry. Millennials killed napkins. Gen Z can't handle a full workday. These headlines get enormous engagement. People share them. People argue about them. And that's exactly the problem. It is dramatically easier to write a story blaming individual spending habits than it is to explain a macroeconomic shift in housing to income ratios. One fits in a headline, the other requires an economics degree to properly unpack. So media and political narratives consistently choose the simple explanation: individual failure, bad habits, poor discipline, buying coffee instead of saving. Meanwhile, the actual structural forces get almost no airtime. Rising cost of living, the disappearance of stable entry-level jobs due to automation, housing prices that have detached completely from wage growth. These forces don't make for a viral headline. Systemic economic restructuring reduces opportunity for new entrants, doesn't get shared at the dinner table. Kids today are lazy, does. And once that narrative takes hold, it does something even more damaging than just being wrong. Here's where this stops being about hurt feelings and starts being about actual power. Large generational cohorts, meaning generations with unusually big populations, carry disproportionate voting power and market influence simply because there are more of them. When a large generational block reaches the stage of life where they own homes, they tend to vote for policies that protect and increase home values. That makes complete sense from their perspective. Nobody wants their biggest asset to lose value, but it means housing policy gets shaped by the group that already owns homes, not by the group trying to buy their first one. The result is a slow, compounding effect. Zoning laws that limit new construction, tax incentives that favor existing homeowners, policies that, whether intentionally or not, make it harder for the next generation to reach the same milestone the current generation already achieved. This isn't a conspiracy. Nobody is meeting in a secret room planning to sabotage young people. It's simpler and more uncomfortable than that. It's self-interest multiplied across millions of votes, compounding over decades into a structural disadvantage for whoever comes next. And blaming that next generation for the outcome is far more comfortable than acknowledging the policy choices that created it. But voting patterns are only half the story. There's an even heavier weight being passed down. Every generation that holds power tends to spend. Infrastructure, entitlement programs, tax cuts, stimulus packages, military spending. Some of this spending is genuinely necessary. Some of it is politically convenient because the bill doesn't come due immediately. Here's the mechanic that makes this particularly unfair. Deficit spending today can boost the economy and asset values for the generation currently in charge, but the debt itself doesn't disappear. It gets carried forward. The generation that benefited from the spending isn't always the generation that pays it back. Economists across the political spectrum, including some of the wealthiest individuals in the world, have pointed out this exact pattern. Extensive deficit spending during previous decades increased the wealth and comfort of older cohorts while transferring the financial burden onto the younger and, in some cases, not yet born labor force. That's not a value judgment about whether the spending was good or bad, it's simply how the mechanism works. Spend now, someone pays later. And someone is very rarely the generation that did the spending. So a young person entering the workforce today isn't just competing in a tougher job market with worse housing affordability. They're also inheriting financial obligations they had zero say in creating, and then, on top of all that, they're told they're the entitled ones. So why does this cycle keep repeating, generation after generation, for 2,500 years? Because blaming a generation is psychologically easier than confronting a system. If the problem is young people today lack work ethic, that's simple. It has a villain. It has an easy fix. Just work harder, spend less, stop complaining. Nobody has to examine housing policy, tax structure, automation, or debt distribution. But if the problem is the economic system has shifted in ways that structurally disadvantage new entrants regardless of their effort, that's uncomfortable. It implicates policy decisions. It implicates the people currently holding power. It requires actual structural change, which is slow, expensive, and politically risky. So society keeps choosing the easy narrative, generation after generation. It's not laziness of thought, or it's a defense mechanism. Blaming individuals distracts everyone, including the people doing the blaming, from having to reckon with systemic failures they'd rather not examine too closely. And the tragic part is this. The generation currently doing the blaming was, at some point, on the receiving end of the exact same accusation. Every generation that gets called lazy eventually grows up, gains power, gains assets, and then watches the next generation struggle under new conditions they didn't have to face. And instead of recognizing the pattern, most repeat it. The 25-year-old getting lectured about coffee spending today will statistically grow older, accumulate some assets, watch the economy shift again in ways they don't fully understand, and very possibly say some version of the same thing to the generation after them, not because they're hypocrites, because the pattern is 2,500 years deep, and almost nobody stops to ask why they're saying it in the first place. The economy has genuinely changed in ways that make things harder for people entering it today. That part is real and measurable. But the instinct to blame the individuals living through that change instead of the system producing it, that part is ancient, predictable, and almost mechanical in how reliably it shows up. So the next time you hear someone say a generation is the reason the economy is struggling, remember this. That sentence has been said, in some form, by nearly every generation in recorded history about the one right after it. Maybe the question isn't what's wrong with the young people, maybe it's why we keep asking that instead of looking at the system underneath. What do you think? Is this cycle something we can actually break? Or is it just baked into how economies and generations interact? Let me know in the comments. If this reframed how you think about generational arguments, subscribe. We're breaking down more of these hidden patterns next.